Great. And as I look out and see some of you glazing over, and I appreciate that it's 4:22, and some of you are already booked off in your brains, but it's really quite interesting how some of the things that Jessica was saying about balance and equal opportunity and equal participation at the table and so on was causing some people in your groups to sort of roll their eyes and say, yeah, right, as they pointed to various groups, usually government, that they thought were going to overwhelm. And I don't know what that means or what your experience has been of that, but if that's a value, it was certainly echoed in a number of tables. And the structures that PNCIMA activates and operationalizes has got to take that into account. So it's going to be very interesting. And tomorrow we will be talking about public-private partnerships and other ways in which these initiatives have been activated in other jurisdictions. So that'll be interesting. Pete.
My name is Pete Sperling. I'd like to thank my group as well for providing some really rich and engaging discussions. One of the things that came up, there was a lot of questions around the level of commitment and what sort of involvement in the process would mean for everybody. And there was there was concern around needing a greater level of understanding around the process before real engagement could occur. Some of the things that did come up, there were some questions around inclusiveness, and there was a recognition that there were people and stakeholders that were missing, and there was definitely acknowledgement that everyone needed to be included in moving forward. So as well that there was a lot of talk around localized management and certainly autonomy of traditional areas for groups that weren't actively involved in PNCIMA. And that people wanted a voice around the decisions around the local areas. For example, fish farm locations, fisheries closures, and other things that mattered, locally. In the same vein, they want their local values protected and recognized. As far as vision, certainly it was, First Nations knowledge of the area is important that it be taken into account in sort of any vision that goes forward. And as well that the ecosystem integrity and the recognition that everything else is dependent on the health of the ecosystem was sort of echoed a lot, and that without a healthy ecosystem, a lot of the other things aren't going to matter. And so that was sort of first and foremost before we can even start and look at those other things. If they're not there, if the ecosystem isn't there, then those other things aren't going to be there. And the last thing, I guess, was around the scale of the PNCIMA and sort of the area, in regards to the area and it being, very large. And so sort of looking at, how you can, how that gets broken down into more localized areas. And also the scale in regards to the issues that you're trying to address are happening at different scales and at different levels, and that needs to be looked at.
Great. I think your group talked more about that than some other groups, the whole question of scale and scope, and it depends at what level of refinement the planning is going to occur. So something that'll have to be considered. The other piece that your group concentrated on, and others echoed it this morning, I think, in the plenary sessions in your questions, was we need greater understanding before ... before such and such can happen. We need to understand the process better. We need to understand the terms of reference better, and so on and so on. And that's a bit of a dog chasing its tail in the sense that the steering committee is also saying to you, look, we need your vision before we can even begin to imagine creating that sort of detail. So is it a chicken and an egg or a dog chasing its tail? It's iterative. Each of those is going to contribute to the other. And it is difficult at this early point to contribute when you don't know what the rules are, or to make the rules when you don't know what the vision is. So hopefully that's going to be filled in, because that's a frustration for everybody. Janelle.
Hi everyone, my name's Janelle Smith, and I'd just like to echo my thanks to my group as well for providing what I believe was a really rich dialogue and for really being respectful of one another and listening and providing opportunity for everyone who wanted to speak. So I'll just try to quickly touch on some of the main themes or some of the central themes, but of course by no means all of them that came up during the session. So one of them being inclusivity and this whole notion of all of who want to be included in the process should be provided some opportunity to be included, but recognizing that there's some natural tension in this with also being aware of people's capacity to participate. Also providing opportunity to be heard and to feel as though you're genuinely being listened to and your opinions heard. Again, this ties into inclusivity and communication, so being clear up front about what one's interests are in the process, and building in mechanisms to help others become aware who may not already be aware of the process and that it's taking place. Another theme was ties into transparency of the process, knowing what's needed and wanted from others who are involved in the process, and a degree of flexibility being built into it, so to transform as the ecosystem and the resources change. Also an access to information and data, so the ability to access and also knowing where to get access to information. The notion of trust came up, so the need for consistency and also authority and credibility. So knowing that whoever you're working with or signing on to an agreement with has not only the authority to follow through on that, but also the will to do what they say they're going to do. And the notion of responsibility, not just the responsibility of governments, for example, to follow through on the process, but also acknowledging as participants in the process, no matter whom you represent, that you need to be accountable and responsible to the process as it unfolds. And finally, being aware of the multiple ways of valuing resources. So not just those that have a traditional or commercial value in the traditional sense.
Interesting. Great. Diversity. Good. And emphasizing the flexibility and the agility of the process or of the initiative, and that it has to be able to adapt to changing circumstances, because it's going to take a while to put into effect. It's going to take a while to begin to monitor and implement, and then it's going to change over time. Interesting.